And thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to share it with us during this session. First of all, let me introduce myself. John Abbott, as Sue mentioned, I'm a director here at Cardenas Risk Management, and over the past 22 years, my role has been very much to help organisations to design, create, launch, and ultimately manage office ergonomics programs. And during that time working with Cardenas, we've got a lot of experience in doing this. So Cardenas itself is an end-to-end office ergonomics consultancy. We can support our customers in terms of developing policy and processes around an office ergonomics program. We have online tools such as Healthy Working, which is an e-learning and self-assessment tool that we developed in partnership with the UK regulator, the Health and Safety Executive. We also have a network of certified professionals around the world who can help us to deliver virtual and on-site assessments in 191 countries around the world. And so between those various products, we now look after just over 1,500 customers around the world, many of whom have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. And we also support many partners. So for example, the insurer Marsh and the facilities management company Jones Lang LaSalle. So we have a lot of experience, we have a lot of data that we use to help our global customers, but also our customers who have complex organizational structures to create really world-beating ergonomics programs. But I think in order for us to look forward and to figure out what a world-class ergonomics program looks like, it's worth stepping back and just looking backwards to what we've learned over the last couple of years, because truly the last 2 years with the pandemic have been a huge learning curve for many of us. And before 2020, many of our ergonomics programs tended to be regional or local in approach. Now, by that, what I mean, many of our customers would have a centralized policy, or at least some common principles that they would expect the organization to comply with. But then they'd allow practitioners around the world or within various sites within a country to develop and evolve their own programs. And providing these programs met the principles of the policy, and providing they were achieving the objectives that were set out, leadership really took very little interest in ergonomics programs. Providing it wasn't a challenge to the business, providing it was ticking over, leadership were quite happy just to let these programs run their course. And then, of course, early 2020, the pandemic struck, and the world changed very quickly in the world of office ergonomics as Cardenas saw it. So not just ergonomics, but many things came to the attention of the board. We had things such as connectivity with our home workers, information security, and in terms of EHS, of course, we had many lone workers, we had mental health that was a significant challenge for many of us. But suddenly ergonomics became quite a priority. It was, for many service companies, a common theme that affected, their worldwide workforce. And so to make sure that everyone was being properly addressed, what we saw was a consolidation with many of our customers and a re-centralization of various ergonomics programs to a central point. And that caused in itself some real challenges, because when we were looking at organizations who were centralizing their approach, they were essentially taking away some regional programs from local practitioners that had been in place for quite some time and were truly effective. They were driving some really great results. And in doing so, these practitioners were feeling less valued. They had a program that was working really well, and it was simply being replaced by a centralized program that perhaps didn't consider the needs of that local audience. We had, and we still have in many countries, supply chain issues. We can't necessarily get ergonomic kit to many of our workers, so we need to think about how we address those kind of issues. And at the time, a number of crazy decisions were made. With hindsight, there were crazy decisions. At the time, they seemed perfectly plausible. So, for example, we had a number of customers who provided workers with a stipend, $500, £500 to go and buy the equipment that they needed to work from home. And that's very reasonable, except for most employers that did that did not provide the workers with any guidance or support around what they should be looking for and what they should be trying to implement. And there's one case in particular I know in the United States of a worker who literally spent the whole $500 on a keyboard. It was a fabulous keyboard. It looked awesome. It had flashing lights, had no ergonomics value whatsoever. So that $500 stipend effectively brought no value to that worker's well-being when we considered his ergonomic setup. And this process that we went through had a number of effects. And so certainly in regulated countries around the world, we saw a lot of activity by lawyers, by ambulance chasers, looking to pursue claims on behalf of people who are injured in that home working or that hybrid working environment. Now, I know you're not going to be able to read the screen grab here very easily, but essentially this is a lawyer's website saying, you know, if you're hurting, if you're injured, if you have not been trained, we are likely to take your case. So they're not even looking at the risk assessment process. The lawyer's looking at it wholly from an educational perspective. If you haven't been given the understanding of how to work safely from home and you're hurting, we'll come after you. And so this clearly increased liability for a lot of employers at that time. And what we do know, looking at the data from our systems, is the type and the frequency of injury really has increased over the past 2 years. So pre-pandemic, when we were mainly working in an office, the most common point of discomfort was in the wrists. As we went into the pandemic, so early 2020, we started to see that pain point move to lower back. We've looked into this and essentially we've uncovered the fact that a lot of workers went to work from home at a time before we could implement control measures, before we could give them the kit, the equipment that they needed. And a lot of people at that time were working on couches. There was no support for the lower back. And that's where the pain point started to manifest itself. The further we went through the pandemic, and as we started to provide people with better kit, the pain point went to the neck and the shoulders, and that's where it continues to remain. Now, we haven't finished our research into why. We think it might be because people are getting better postures working from home, but they're still at kitchen counters, they're still at dining room tables and chairs that don't provide the right level of adjustments to support workers. But we'll be reporting on that hopefully in the next few weeks. The other area of discomfort that we found, and in fact the other area of injury, was within manual handling. And so for those workers who have a smaller accommodation, maybe a small apartment, small flat in metropolitan cities, we found that workers wanted to put their kit away at the end of the day. They wanted to forget about work. And so we saw a lot more stooping, twisting, bending as they were moving chairs out of rooms and packing their laptops away. And of course, that clearly does increase the risk exposure for a lot of organizations. So I'd always recommend, if you are looking to develop an office ergonomics program, really incorporate manual handling into it for your home and for your hybrid workers. But the challenges we had going through the lockdown are still challenges that we're presented with now, and they will continue to be a challenge for us. So we need to understand the regulatory framework. Now, that's especially important in the global environment, but it does pose some challenges even for us locally. As an example of that, here in the UK, where I'm speaking from, we have the DSC regulations that relate to office ergonomics, and they're pretty prescriptive. The regulations will tell you what you have to do, and there's always guidance alongside that tells you how to comply with it. The challenge alongside that, though, is while you might be complying technically to the DSE regulations, most countries will also have a duty of care. And so if we have home workers where we know they're working on a couch, they're working on a dining room table and chair, we need to be educating them, and we need to be risk assessing them for any exposures to harm that they have working on that couch and working on that dining room table. So we need to make sure that we're not being so blinkered to follow one regulation that we could be caught out by another one. I'm starting to see a little bit of complacency also with leadership teams, with hybrid workers. A lot of people are, and I hear this quite a lot, people are only working from home a couple of days a week. You know, there's no real harm to them that way. I tend to turn that conversation on its head to say, working from home 2 days a week, that's 40% of an individual's working week. And so from my perspective, I think 40% of your time, if you're working in an inappropriate way, it is foreseeable that you could develop discomfort. It is foreseeable that you could develop an injury. And therefore, it does open the pathway to litigation if a worker does hurt themselves. So I always say, you know, look at things in terms of the amount of time that people are at different locations, different workstations, and make sure you have a risk assessment process in place that determines how you're going to be managing that worker. Another issue, you know, before lockdown, if we did have a home worker that was experiencing discomfort, it was perfectly reasonable to perhaps even do a home visit for that worker. But with the volumes that we have now, you know, we've moved clearly to virtual assessments rather than on-site assessments. But even within that, we have a lot of workers that we're seeing who do not want to invite you into their home, either through a physical appearance or through a digital appearance, so a webcam. There could be privacy issues there, it could be safeguarding. We've even seen people who just don't want to open their webcam up to have an assessment because their house isn't clean and they've had the embarrassment of not having a tidy home. So these are all things that we need to bear into account as we move forwards with implementing an ergo program. But our customers tend to run one of three types of solutions. The first one that we're seeing here, everything based around a policy, is really for those organizations who tend to have deep pockets or have a very much a one-to-one relationship with their workers, where if an individual wants an assessment, they're simply given an assessment. Now, this tends to be pretty expensive because you can't control your cost exposure. You can't be sure how many people are going to request an assessment, and you obviously can't take it away from them. We have a second group of customers who will use an online assessment to filter workers initially. And the online assessment will then allow you to signpost those workers or to provide them with self-help functionality where they can manage some of the risk for themselves insofar as they can. And that then reduces the number of virtual assessments that may be needed to mitigate any residual risk. The third group of customers that I have are ones who truly embrace technology, and they'll use online e-learning before the online assessment moving through. And that online e-learning can also have a very beneficial effect in helping a worker to reduce their risk, especially into the long term. But even with that, where we have organizations that truly embrace technology, I always recommend that you have workarounds to this. You have a worker's ability to bypass formal processes, especially if they have a disability or they have an injury in place already. It might be more appropriate for them to be able to access a consultant, a DSE assessor, right from the start, rather than put them through an online process that may not be appropriate. And I am a big advocate of using technology, of using e-learning, and whether that's something you use off the shelf or you develop yourself, it can have some really positive effects. And this is a little case study of some work we did with a mining company out of Brazil. They have over 200,000 workers around the world. They ran a pilot with a group of workers, and as we can see here, 671 of those workers using an online assessment reported daily pain at some part of their body. 3,800 workers reported weekly pain at some part of their body. Now, by using the online tools, we were able to dramatically reduce that risk without any organizational intervention. And we can see at the end of the process, the no-risk workers went from 990 down up to 4,850, very positive impact. But in terms of cost, if we'd gone through that first option of just allowing people to request a virtual assessment, if all of these workers had been provided with an assessment, the cost exposure to this mining company would have been around $582,000 US. If we were to limit that just to the medium and high risk workers, $453,000 US. But actually, if by using the online tools, by using the e-learning, the self-assessment, where we reduce the number of both medium and high risk workers through the self-help, through the signposting, the actual cost exposure was as low as $49,000. So by using a truly integrated process, not only can we demonstrate actual cost savings to organizations, but you've also got the indirect costs as well, the improvement in morale, improvement in productivity, reduction in lost time productivity. So it's always worthwhile looking at resources, both externally and internally. If you have a learning management system where you can create your own tools, it's worth doing that. But if you are developing e-learning, there's a few things I would absolutely advise you to do. Treat everybody as an individual. We are all individuals, and I think using smartphone and app technologies nowadays, we get so used to having, bespoke experiences. If you have workers who sit in a wheelchair and never use an office chair, there's little point in teaching somebody how to adjust a chair with a 5-caster base. So make sure your e-learning teaches a wheelchair user how to work safely at a workstation with their wheelchair. If you have people with audio or visual difficulties, how are we signposting them to the right resources within the organization? One size fits all really does not work. And if we can give people a very personalized experience, what we find is that they appreciate the respect for their time. We tend to get much better outputs from them because they're able to relate more effectively to the approach that we're providing. And the whole process is much more effective for you as an organisation through that Ergo programme. Make it meaningful too. A worker who's working in a control centre with a number of fixed monitors is going to need a very different experience to a worker who's using a laptop in a hybrid environment and perhaps hotel working. So make sure that you are delivering the right content to the right workers based upon their environment. In graphics organisations, for example, they'll use graphics tablets, they'll use even games consoles in the course of their work. So let's make sure that we're giving people training on the equipment they're using through your e-learning. I'm always a big fan of making sure that you consider languages. Many organisations we work with will have English as a company language, but there's a lot of immigration, there's a lot of migration nowadays, and so I always advocate that we should make sure that even though English is your company language, we can't always guarantee that a worker will truly understand your message if it is delivered in English. So look at what your best practice should be within your organisation. Speak to your learning and development team to make sure that we are presenting content that works. Be pragmatic. I mentioned earlier, if you've got somebody who's working on a couch, while it's not ideal, let's teach them how to work safely at a couch. It isn't ideal, but if we know we've got people who are working like that, we can keep them injury-free. We can help them with their discomfort by taking breaks, by giving them the education in how to work as effectively as they can do. So again, don't shy away from poor behaviours, poor environments. If there's nothing that you can do about it, the best thing I say is let's embrace it and let's make the best of that environment and educate people in working as safely and effectively as they can be. But importantly, make any e-learning your own. Each of you are working for organisations who will have your own branding, your own style, your own communication processes. Electronic Arts, for example, they build avatars from their games into their program. Use the best of what your organisations have to offer, because if it's familiar to your colleagues, again, the outcomes that you can deliver are so much better than anything that you might get from off the shelf. It's also worth considering your virtual assessments as well. I think the days of on-site assessments in the main are behind us, except for people who maybe have disabilities or more advanced injuries. We are certainly working with Guy as well. We've delivered tens of thousands of virtual assessments over the past couple of years. Whilst you might have really good members in your Ergo team, really good DSE assessors, I'm a big believer in using in-country assessors. Cultural sensitivities nowadays are one of the biggest issues that we have to address, and certainly one of the things that we found through our virtual assessment program is, and this is a generalization, so forgive me, when we're delivering an assessment to a home worker in Japan, the home is a very quiet place, it's very respectful, it's very reserved. We need to be mindful of that. Conversely, if you do an assessment in India, family units tend to be bigger, the home tends to be louder, more bombastic, and we need an assessor who understands that and is able to get their message across. A local assessor who's not, an assessor who's not in country may not have that understanding. Some countries require board certification, and so again, it's worth knowing that, because you might be falling foul of the law without realising it through ignorance. So it's worth knowing that as well. I'm a big believer when it comes to virtual assessments is encouraging the worker to have two devices. One face on, so we have this level of engagement as we're going through right now, but to ask the worker to have a smartphone, a cell phone off to one side. So as a consultant is engaging with the worker, they can be observing their postures, their behaviours, and giving them really great advice from that observational element. But also be mindful of the unexpected. Consultants, ergonomic consultants, quite often nowadays are one of the few healthcare providers or one of the healthcare professionals that many of us get to speak to. Throughout COVID, and certainly in some of the Southern European countries, we came across a number of people who were going through mental health crises, truly mental health crises. And so our ergonomists had to be very mindful of what they did in that situation. So I'd advise that your Ergo team members are aware of your employee assistance program, that they are aware of data privacy requirements. If you find a worker who is going through a mental health crisis, can they report it back to the organisation or not? Should they report it to the authorities or not? There's no right or wrong way of doing this, but this is probably one of my biggest suggestions today is your ergonomists, as I mentioned earlier, one of few healthcare professionals that many of your home workers and hybrid workers may be speaking to because of the backlogs with our healthcare systems. So just be mindful that you will uncover other conditions that you will be forced to address. So to wrap up, look, make sure your training is appropriate. One size fits all doesn't always work. Whether you're using an off-the-shelf package or you're developing your own, customize it, adapt it, make it right for your environments, for your people and your cultures. Know what your support strategy is as well with your Ergo program. I mentioned earlier supply chains are tricky. That will be the case for a given period of time, I'm sure. Some of my customers have taken that attitude that they're not going to provide their home or hybrid workers with any equipment. You're saving money on your commute. If you want something, you buy it yourself. And that in itself isn't necessarily wrong, but know it, be able to explain why to workers and own that policy. But also be creative. Guy will come on to this, I'm sure. Supply chains are a problem, but we have workers who are in very small apartments, very small buildings where they don't have the space or even the desire to have work equipment in their home. But through lockdown, we've seen some real creativity. On Amazon now, you can even buy a cardboard desk. You know, it's not perfect. It's not going to solve problems necessarily, but it will go some way to helping. So be mindful of some of the solutions that are out there. They might be a bit wacky, but they might work. To finish, Cardinus has created a couple of guides that might be useful to you. So the first is a guide to office ergonomics regulation. We've looked at your training and assessment requirements in 191 countries around the world, and we've also pulled across the text from that regulation, that act or that law. This is completely free of charge, and the IISM will be reaching out to all of you after this session to invite you to request a copy. Secondly, if anyone is considering implementing ergonomics software, we've developed a guide for you as well that really helps you to step out of what you know and look at, you know, true blue sky thinking. What is your perfect ergonomics program and how can software support that? And it also includes a glossary of terms so you can engage more effectively with your technical security and other colleagues. And again, the IISM will be inviting you to request a free of charge copy of that document as well. I've overrun my time, everybody, so I'm so sorry. So Stephen, please let me hand over to you for your session.
Thanks, John. Yes, so hello everyone. My name's Stephen Bowden. I'm a chartered ergonomist and I work for a company called Morgan Maxwell. We work closely with Cardinus, and we've been over the past year, we've been developing a tool called Healthy Working Analytics, and it's about unlocking employee well-being and productivity. I'm just going to briefly touch upon the benefits of such a tool and how you can, especially sort of pre-COVID, but also prior to COVID, the importance of these people analytics tools to understand what's stopping your staff, your colleagues doing their best work, what's affecting their well-being and productivity. So as I said, I'm a chartered ergonomist. I work for Morgan Maxwell. We've been working with the University of Hertfordshire, Professor Neil Spencer, who's a chartered statistician and a professor in statistics, to develop the Healthy Working Analytics to make sure all of the results we get from Healthy Working Analytics can be as valid as possible. Healthy Work Analytics is an online employee survey with statistics and data-rich reporting backed by leading expertise. It's designed to provide business leaders with data that allows focused interventions to improve and measure their workforce well-being, self-reported productivity, actual productivity, and payback time. It establishes, Healthy Work Analytics establishes to what extent working environmental factors are distracting employees from fully concentrating on the tasks they are responsible for. But if an employee is unable to concentrate and unable to meet their goals, this can cause the employee's perception of their subjective well-being, as I'll explain in a moment, to be out of balance, leading, if unchecked, to ill health and deterioration in productivity. So we spent a lot of time looking at the literature for the design of the question sets for Healthy Work Analytics. Obviously, I work in the field of ergonomics, and I've always had an interest in an ergonomics approach to well-being and productivity. But we found Rebecca Dodge's paper, and her PhD was the challenge of defining well-being, the reference at the bottom here. But she defined well-being as the balance point between an individual's resources and challenges. And underneath the resources and challenges are physical, social, and psychological. Now, in this example here, where challenges and resources are in balance, this is a productive individual. Their well-being is in balance. They're in a good place. Where issues occur is where challenges start to outweigh resources. All resources outweigh challenges. Most commonly, what we see though is challenges outweighing resources. This is normal on a day-to-day basis. You have different resources and challenges every day. But when the problems occur is when this state is sustained for extended periods of time. Now, healthy work analytics is designed to try and keep people healthy and present at work. If you get to this state where you can't concentrate because you're being distracted by a number of different things, it could be musculoskeletal disorders, which John just talked about. It could be relationship with your line manager. It could be, if you're working in the office, distractions from speech intelligibility and poor acoustics. It could be a number of different things. But if this your sustained distraction, this can start to lead to the individual being unable to cope with challenges from those distractions, which leads to reduced concentration and performance. Then the well-being's out of equilibrium. That can then lead to quite rapidly ill health, short-term absence, long-term absence, and exit from the company. So healthy work analytics is there to identify across your business what are the areas that are affecting well-being and productivity, and get people back healthy and present at work. So briefly, I won't go into this in too much detail, but just to show you that we looked at the literature in detail. The question sets within healthy work analytics are based on the physical, psychological, and social elements of subjective well-being. Now, Prochaska et al. Did some work looking at the areas that are correlated with self-reported productivity, because we want to make sure the questions we're asking are connected with productivity. That's important, as well as if we improve well-being, generally we get an improvement in productivity as well. So Prochaska found in their research that your personal well-being and work well-being, there are some specific categories that are correlated with self-reported productivity. So we designed our question sets based on Dodge's work, Prochaska's work, and a number of different consultants' experience in occupational health, ergonomics, physiotherapy, for example. So I just wanted to quickly show you the Healthy Work Analytics dashboard. Now, the Healthy Work Analytics dashboard we're still in it's about to be released by Cardinus, and Cardinus are working with a number of different clients at the moment on Healthy Work Analytics. But if you're interested, get in contact with Cardinus afterwards and they can provide you more information. But to give you some quick run through of the dashboard, first of all, you get what's called in ranking order from a company-wide results, the mean healthy working distraction score. Now, this is a list in ranking order of the topics that are causing the biggest distraction, the topics that are putting your staff's well-being out of balance. Now, what we produce within Healthy Work Analytics is what the Healthy Working Distraction Score. Now, in this example data, it's a 3.7. The Healthy Working Distraction Score goes from 0, no distraction, so optimal well-being, which is not possible to get to 0 distraction, but all the way up to 10, high distraction. And we have a traffic light system of green, amber, and red. So in this scenario, this organisation with 75 employees had a distraction score of 3.7. But the Healthy Work and Distraction Score is a measure of how much employees are distracted from carrying out their best work. Now, from a statistics perspective, you need to have a minimum amount of people complete the survey to get robust, reliable results. In this scenario, Healthy Work Analytics has worked out that we have 71% of the population, and we need to get to 75%. But what we don't want in a wellbeing program is to have the same approach to all of our staff, because they have different needs. Now, in Healthy Work Analytics, we have multiple classifiers. So in this example, we can look at departments. So we can look at, so at the moment, we're looking at company-wide results of a 3.7 wellbeing distraction score. And we're listing company-wide in ranking order the main areas of discomfort. So company-wide, we have workload pressures, low level of energy, lack of sleep, excessive email are the top 4 distractions. But then we can look at company-wide. So we can look at UK customer services for this specific company. And we can see their distraction score is a 2, green. That's fantastic. But there's still some things we can improve on here. So lack of sleep, illness or injury, mobile computing equipment, carrying out tasks that you think should have been done differently are the main distractors there for UK customer services. But then we can look at the sales department and we can see straight away lack of sleep, workload pressures, excessive email are the top three, different from UK customer services, for example. So one size does not fit all. We need to look at the data in detail to really get an understanding, and that's what healthy work analytics can do. But we can also look at work location. So with obviously post-COVID, more people are working from home. So we can have in healthy work analytics will allow a direct comparison between the home office, which is you can see a 3.2 distraction score, comparing that to the company office. So in the company office, in this data set, we have interruptions from people, temperature, abnormal tasks, lack of sleep being the top 4 distractions, which is different from when people are working from home. But also we have a lower distraction score, interestingly, for this specific client when working from home. So that allows you to make more focused interventions, more targeted interventions, but also we can look at multiple classifiers. We can look at age range. Now, the reason I've chosen age range is one wellbeing program for the whole company will not work. We need to, depending on your age group, you're going to have different needs and concerns and different challenges and different resources available to you to meet those challenges. So, for example, 20 to 20, less than 20 or 20 to 29 year group, we've got quite a high distraction score, wellbeing distraction score, 6.1. As we get older, so 40 to 49 year olds have a much lower healthy working distraction score, as you can see, and they have different challenges and they have different amounts of resources depending on life experience, financial resources. Finance is a big thing for 20 to 29 compared to 40 to 49. So providing support and advice around managing debt, for example, can be a really good initiative for 20 to 29 year olds, which really wouldn't get a good return for your business to 40 to 49 year olds. So that's the initial summary page. But you can also look at, from a spider diagram, we can look down from above. These are the well-being categories that I talked about in the research that are correlated with self-reported productivity. So this chart shows the healthy work and distraction score with each well-being category. So let me reset this. This shows now the company-wide results. What are the main categories in your business that are causing the biggest impact on their subjective well-being and their subjective self-reported productivity? So in this example, company-wide, not enough time, depressed, stress are the 2 well-being categories causing the biggest distraction. But I can click on that and discover, okay, I've got some specific subjects here that I can focus on as a manager. But again, similar to the previous tab I just showed you, we can look at work location and we can compare company office to the whole company. We can compare home office to the whole company to see how we're getting on. So there's multiple classifiers there that we can look at. We can compare 20 to 29 year old group to the overall company. So that we can see here, there's definitely some work to do for this specific group. Now, where healthy work analytics gets really clever from a statistical analysis perspective, it does a lot of the hard work for you. What you don't want to be doing with your surveys is crunching the data. All of the statistical analysis has been done by professors from the University of Hertfordshire, experts in statistical analysis, and the impact assessment heat map basically works out which areas are you going to have the biggest impact on the distraction score? Which areas should you focus on, taking into account all of the hundreds of different variables within healthy work analytics? So obviously we have employment type, gender, work location, work setting, the different departments, time within the organisation, age range. There's many, many different variables. Healthy work analytics has automatically worked out company-wide that it's the not enough time group, full-time employees, 45 of them, that's the group where you're going to have the biggest return, getting the well-being in balance and your productivity as high as it possibly can be. Once again, we can look at we can look at employment type, we can look at age range, and we can see the specific concerns this specific group is having and where we should start and focus our resources. But we can also go into more detailed statistical analysis. For those of you who have people within your organisation that ask questions around statistical analysis and want to have confidence in the data, you can look at the summary overview and just have that high-level data. We can also go into much more detail. So Healthy Work Analytics automatically does statistical analysis here. So what it's worked out here is looking at the classifiers that we've already been through: department, work location, gender, etc. And it can look comparing that to all of the questions within Healthy Work Analytics. Now, Healthy Work Analytics has worked out that there is a difference between property insurance and support comparing to the other departments. This difference has not happened by chance. And we know that because we use confidence intervals in our data analysis. If these confidence intervals overlap, if there's no lap, if they're not overlapping, this has not happened by chance. We need to do further investigation here. So noise for these two departments is really impacting their well-being and productivity. We can also have the same statistical analysis looking at other questions we ask within Healthy Work Analytics. So we also cover diet, exercise, prolonged time sitting, sort of covering musculoskeletal ergonomics, days absence due to illness, days lost to distraction, so self-reported presenteeism, days working due to illness, and self-reported productivity. So the system has automatically, Healthy Work Analytics has automatically worked out, once again, support and property insurance. There's a difference between the question around their ability to have a healthy diet when at work. There's a difference there, so we need to do further investigation. And then you can go through each work location. The system automatically works out where there is a difference. So it does a lot of the work for you. A couple more tabs and I'll finish up and give you a summary. We can also look at in the spider diagram, which is very useful for PowerPoint presentations, to quickly identify to senior management where you've got issues with well-being and productivity. We can look at comparing departments, as you can see here, in an overlay fashion. So we can see we've got some outliers here. We can look at work type setting. We can look at employment type. So just in a spider diagram sort of overview from a helicopter sort of view is a useful visualization there. But also within Healthy Work Analytics, we have in each question, I don't have the time to show you the online questionnaire, which we spent a lot of time and money ensuring that confidentiality is one of our #1 priorities. So within the Healthy Work Analytics, you can, in each section, each question section, you can write comments in relation to your concerns. So this only goes down to department level. You can't go down to age group, for example, because then you could start to identify specific people, which is what we don't want. We don't want managers knocking on people's doors, for example, or coming to their desk knowing the feedback they've given. So it's really highly confidential Healthy Work Analytics. You can look at comparing company-wide comments. You can look at different departments. We can see property and insurance. We can look at sales and see some of the comments for context. Ideally, just as an ergonomic assessment, ideally you would like to go there and spend time with them. But there's not the resources or time to do that. Ideally, you would like to go and do a contextual inquiry at the place of work to find out sort of the messy reality. The open comments allow you to understand that and can give you some analysis on that. So when looking at the analysis of this, we can provide some word clouds, and as the data set become bigger, this can become more useful. So Healthy Work Analytics there is designed to take the guessing out of your well-being and productivity campaigns. It's based, the question sets are based on the literature, and the statistics are designed by professors in statistical analysis. So you can be confident in giving your managers or your colleagues valid and reliable results. It can focus your time and effort as to where you should put your money, where you should spend your time. Should you focus on health promotion? Should you focus in one specific department in reducing excessive email? Should you provide some financial guidance to some specific age groups? Healthy Work Analytics will show you that data. Now, the overall goal of Healthy Work Analytics, just to finish up, is to reduce this healthy work and distraction score. So the idea is you complete this survey, and then the team at Cardenus will support you with those interventions to try to reduce this distraction score. So then you redo the questionnaire twice, 3 times a year to look to continuously bring down this well-being distraction score. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting. People analytics and big data is definitely a growing subject, but I can see why it's growing, because it allows management to really focus their interventions. But thanks very much for your time, and I'll hand over to Guy Osmond.
Just get the right screen. Excuse me. So thank you very much, Stephen. Really impressive tool and some great stuff there. So I'm Guy Osmond. I'm Managing Director of Osmond Ergonomics. We've been in workplace ergonomics for nearly 30 years now. And in simple terms, we're office furniture suppliers. We do much more than that, but we always look at these things from an ergonomics perspective. So I want to look at a bit more about the equipment that you might be thinking about for staff. So topic we have is creating a healthy workspace. Obviously, from this picture, the answer is if you want healthy, happy people, just give them pizza. But obviously, unfortunately, there's rather more to it than that. And I've suddenly lost my screen, I think. So I apologize for that. Let's get it back. Sorry, I moved something and it actually moved everything. Apologies. So what I want to look for today is, in the next 10 or so minutes, what's changed since COVID, what are the issues today, and what can be done, looking particularly at equipment, both from a home working perspective, but also to create what I call a magnetic workplace, a place that people actually want to come to. So the most significant thing that's changed is actually the recognition of home working and how that is recognized. Before COVID, there were lots of organizations already doing agile working, as we called it then, but a lot of organizations basically thought that home working was just a euphemism for watching Netflix. Now, we all realize that that's not at all the case. And in fact, we've generally found that this is much more the image now. People are conscientious, they get on their work, they like the ability to concentrate and so forth at home. But as has already been mentioned this afternoon, we're seeing a lot of mental health issues as well. And indeed, a lot of attention has been given to mental health. And I think that's absolutely right, absolutely necessary. But I think in the process, there's been quite a lot of neglect of physical problems. And I think that's a major issue that we need to be looking at more carefully now. So if we look at the expectations of those who've been given this opportunity for hybrid working, or recently mainly home working, what many of them have found, and there's never a one size fits all, as Stephen's just been saying, it varies from individual to individual, but a high proportion of home workers have found they like the work-life balance, or as some people prefer to call it, the integration now. They like to be able to get down and focus on their work. They like to be able to go out and walk the dog in the middle of the afternoon if they've got a thorny problem they just want to kick around in their head. They've saved money on transport and time, of course. They find, as I say, it's easier to concentrate at home, and they've also realized, although it was there before, they've realized just how noisy and potentially distraction, how much distraction there's been in the office. And Stephen's actually mentioned that in his data about noise and distraction being one of the issues. So people are now thinking, well, if you want us to come back to work, we don't really necessarily want to come back to a place like this. Maybe we want something that looks much more like this. So organizations are thinking about how to equip and how to fit out their buildings, their offices, to get people, not only for when they get back in, but actually to attract them, to make them want to come back in. So what are the issues we're seeing at the moment? So we categorize this is not data-driven, this is actually just from my personal observation for organizations we're talking to, from conversations with people at conferences. So it's hearsay, but it's from a wide range of different conversations with different stakeholders, we see three different types of employer. There are those employers who are absolutely doing the best they can for their people. That may be limited to some degree by resources, human, financial, whatever, but they're doing the best they can. They're really doing all they can to get a grip on it. There are the employers who just don't get it. I suspect in this wide mix of delegates we have today, many of you obviously will know Cardinus, so I suspect there's not many in that category. But we do find there are, particularly in the SME, the small businesses, many employers who don't even know what their obligations are, let alone realise how significant the potential issues are. And then there are the employers who are thinking, oh my God, I just don't know where to begin. So they know that this stuff needs to be done. They may have begun researching that, identifying processes and all the rest of it, but they're worried about taking the lid off it in the fear that all hell's going to break loose and it's going to explode in needs and so forth. But what's happening, actually, with all three of those types of employed to a greater or lesser extent, is it people working at home who are actually just not coping and really struggling, not only with mental health, but physical health as well. And I've got a couple of pictures just to illustrate the typical scenarios if nothing's done. This guy here is using a laptop. In European countries where we have display screen equipment regulations, that sort of use for more than short periods is actually it contravenes the statutory requirements. You can't just use the laptop without a separate keyboard and mouse. So that was when we first went into COVID. The health and safety executive said, well, it's only temporary. Well, I think we all agree that actually over 2 years on is no longer temporary. So that scenario, just using a laptop like that, just shouldn't be happening anymore. The other thing one of the things that John mentioned, at kitchen worktops, we typically find that kitchen or dining tables are higher in relation to the chair and they're compared to an office desk, and therefore people, and you can see this guy's actually got slightly hunched shoulders, even in this stock photograph, despite the fact he's using just a computer without anything, and he's got hunched shoulders, he's still got a big smile on his face. But I would like to point out this is a stock photograph, so he's being paid for it. That's not the scenario that we're seeing amongst home workers. Another typical example, this is one particular one we're seeing a lot when we go in to set people up at homes, even when they're being given good chairs or other equipment. There's an individual's desk saying, yes, I've got a table I can use. These drawers under the desk that we're seeing so often mean that you actually just can't get the seat in the right place, get somebody into a good posture, even if they've got a good chair. Just as an example, and this is one specific example of one client to give you an indication of what I see as the scale of the issues of people. And I think this is from talking to John and others around the world. This is probably a global problem. It's not just a specific UK one, although my experience is primarily UK. You'll all recognize this as a sit-stand adapter, the sort of thing you put on a normal fixed height table to be able to stand or sit when you're working. One of our clients decided that they would offer these to their home workers. There was no formal structure in 2021. And with this one client in 2021, we actually sold, without a formal program, 41 of them. Just towards the end of the year, just before Christmas, that employer set up a portal. They had done some of the stuff I'm going to be speaking about in just a minute, or done all of it actually, and they made available to staff an online portal. Employees could go in and order equipment for themselves. Obviously, there are cases of some of it needed occupational health approval or line manager budget approval and so forth, but in principle, anyone working from home would actually have the facilities to just go in and order this stuff. So 41 purchased in 2021. The first Friday of January, we had an order from them, having had this system just live since before Christmas, a formal structure. They ordered 130, and they've since had over 500. So more than 10 times, in fact, in the first 3 months of this year, they'd had compared to last year. So that's this tip of the iceberg scenario that I think we have. And I genuinely believe, don't have specific data for it, but I think there are millions of home workers in the UK alone, let alone around the world, suffering because they haven't had a proper provision, haven't had the proper assessment processes that John has been talking about, companies not looking at the data and so forth that Stephen's been talking about. So what do you need to do? So again, this is a brief session, and I'm really going to focus mainly on homework. I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about the magnetic office, but you need to either restart or kickstart your assessment program. Many of you will be Cardinus clients, so you'll have that capability. Whether you're using it fully, whether it needs a bit of a kickstart, you need to actually know what's going on with your client, with your individual staff, wherever they're working. You then need to work out what sort of budget you have available or can make available for suitable equipment. And actually, if you start this process, it won't be everybody needing everything. But again, as Stephen was saying, you'll be able to look at where the needs are and how you can focus your attention and get the most benefit from your purchases with a decent program. Identify your product shopping list, whether there is a standard chair, whether there's a standard table. You may not even be offering sit-stand desks or sit-stand adapters, but obviously some are. You then work out the program with your suppliers so you can actually set out exactly what you're going to make available, how you can share it. Got some clients just having a downloadable catalog or a PDF catalog from the intranet. Some, like the portal I've just described, are making a much more sophisticated thing. But actually, you need to get all of your procedures and equipment and everything, your supply chain in process. John mentioned about supply chain issues. We've been multi-sourcing a number of products to ensure that we can continue to deliver, and that's a situation that obviously is unlikely to get better in the near future. And then once you've got that in place, you can then open up the program by whatever means to your personnel in a managed, effective way. And you will find there are a lot of people who need some sort of attention that they haven't yet been getting. So briefly then to move on, and again, it's only, as I say, a few minutes to sum up on the magnetic workforce. First question to think about, magnetic workplace, the first question to think about is, why do you want people to come in? Because if you don't know why you want them to come in, you won't be able to equip for them, and frankly, they won't much want to come in. We were talking before COVID and continue to talk about the 4 C's. What sort of activities are they doing? Concentration and contemplation. That works really well often at home, unless you have small children or you're home tutoring or you're doing any of the other things that can be a distraction. But that is what people have found most effective at home. Communication and collaboration are more office-based activities, and that's what people have been missing out on. So you need to think about, if you're going to design a workplace for people to come back to, how can you accommodate those 4 different activities? Or another terminology that many people use is activity-based working. So just as a few images, top right, that's what it has looked like. We've got a number of clients that we're talking to who are taking out lots of desks, replacing them. That's partly because they realize, frankly, their offices were underoccupied before COVID, and now with the amount of home working and so forth, they're going to be seeing that it's even less occupied. Putting in places where people, top left, if they need to work alone, if they need to concentrate, they can do so with acoustic buffering around them. But lots of pods and meeting areas, more social activity, telephone boxes that people can have telephone calls or do Zooms or FaceTime meetings and so forth. So as I say, it's a bit of a run through. There was a lot of really important content that you had before I came on. Obviously, very happy to talk about any of those products or any of those ideas or processes at your leisure. Thank you very much. Back to Sue.
Thank you ever so much, everybody, for a really interesting and informative session. We do have some questions, so I'll kick off. The first question is all about how you actually go about starting to develop what the person that's asked the question is, a truly integrated guidance and support strategy.
Who did you want to pick that up?
Anybody like to take that one?
Answer that in a couple of minutes. I would say the first thing, and I think John's commented on it, my first thing is you need complete buy-in from the very top. It's a complete and utter waste of time if facilities or HR or somebody try to kickstart it. You have to get absolute commitment from a board level, because otherwise it just won't work. Then I would say the next thing to do is to pull together a multidisciplinary committee, so that you've got facilities, HR, well-being, estates, all the people that need to actually IT, absolutely essential, probably occupational health, health and safety, so that all the aspects of the way the business is running and the way to look after people is, I would say that's a starting point. And I'd say everybody's going to need a day or two to do that, and we'd be happy to pick up some further stages once they've got that far.
Thank you, Stephen or John. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I completely agree with Guy. I think as Guy said, get your management buy-in, get your multidisciplinary teams together, but also know what you want to achieve as well. What are the outcomes? Because unless you know what leadership wants, you're not going to be able to achieve that. But HR, IT, occupational health, each of these groups will have different preferred outcomes. So understand what each stakeholder wants, because you can incorporate that into the program right from the start.
Okay, thank you. Stephen?
Yes, I was just going to say, and I think John's done this at the start, try to make the financial argument as well, alongside the ergonomics and health and safety element. If you can make the economic argument wherever possible, that makes the whole process a bit easier for people who don't have the same passion or belief in your core subject. And also, as Healthy Work Analytics is designed to do, if you can provide data to management leadership, there's lots of evidence now. Deloitte did a recent study showing that managers want data now to make decisions. They don't just want ideas, they want it backed up with data. So if you can go along with data and evidence and start tying it in with the financial improvements, that's going to really create change, I would say, from my experience.
Okay, thank you. And that leads on very nicely to our next question. The person asked it says that the use of big data is obviously very powerful, but how do you go about generating meaningful data if you're in a very, very small company?
That's a very good question, and especially in a very small company, confidentiality is really important. So within Healthy Work Analytics, we don't report on less than 5. And if you've got small, say an HR department with 2, we would merge them with another department. So it's a challenge, but it's doable. And sometimes I would suggest that with a smaller organisation, you can have a combination of the big data and the contextual inquiry. Because a smaller company, say of 40 people, you could spend some time there with observation and find out what's going on relatively quickly. But larger organisations, that's not possible. So that's where the big data is more useful. But it's absolutely doable. That example I just gave a moment ago was 57 employees, and there was some meaningful data coming out of that. And as long as you then share those results with the client, with your colleagues. So it's really important, any data capture, you engage with the workforce and let them know, and especially local managers, empower them to be able to provide the feedback, identify what we found. Okay, thanks for your feedback. This is what we've got. This is what we found out that's affecting you doing your best work and affecting your well-being. This is now what we're going to be doing, and communicate with them. And that will then bring them along on the journey. So yeah, the example we gave was with 57 people, so it's definitely doable with people analytics and big data for small organisations.
There is another tool for those who don't at the moment have the benefit of Cardenas' facilities. The IWFM, the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, do have a tool, an ROI tool, which is, I think it's available free at the moment, but so I'll give you the details, and if it's appropriate, you can share that or pass it on.
Thank you. Okay, shall we move on to the next question then? It's how do we ensure our employees are asking for the right equipment which will actually fulfill their needs?
This really comes down to education, I think, making sure people understand why certain bits of equipment can be useful to them, but more importantly, why the kit they think they want might not be so useful. So things like, you know, we have chair envy, we have sit, stand, desk envy. And we see this all the time, that people believe that if I get that sit, stand, desk, it's going to solve all of my problems. Not necessarily the case. And of course, it can really hammer your budgets if you do have that carte blanche attitude of letting people choose what they want. So I would always make sure that you have a good educational program in place that if people are asking for higher value bits of kit, that you are assessing them for that piece of kit. You've got the courage to say no if you don't think it's going to support them, but you've got good justification for why you shouldn't be giving it to them as well. So it really comes down to education and trying to get rid of that chair desk envy that we see so much of.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I was just going to say that I think John's absolutely right, and I think the idea of stipends, I have to say I'm quite strident in my opinions about it. I think a lot of companies a lot of employers early on in COVID were saying, oh, we've given this amount of money. My view is actually that's an abdication of responsibility. I think actually they're just handing out money to pretend that solves the problem. In fact, I've just written an article about why sit-stand desks can be a complete waste of money unless you actually explain people how to use them and what the proper, and sometimes they just turn a bad sitting position into a bad standing posture. So absolutely, product on its own, no use at all. Need to give the education before they get stuff, so that actually they understand what they want and what they need rather than what they want, and so the right products are purchased. And once that's been done, then there's a follow-on program. We've just recently done a thing for home worker chairs, where we actually did a 3-email follow-up, which was, here's another video of how to set yourself up. And then a few days later, here's a posture guidance about where all your kit should be. And then a further one 2 weeks later, slightly tongue-in-cheek, to say, just in case you've ignored everything we told you, here's some stretching exercises to actually make you feel better.
Just to add to that, we had a client who did provide a stipend to their workers back end of 2020. 5 months later, they went out with guidance on what people should spend it on. And so they suddenly had a group of workers who were like, oh my gosh, I need a chair, but I've spent all that money. And so they had a really big demand and no way of satisfying it, because we've already given you the cash, you spent it, it's on you. So it created a lot of ill feeling.
And the person's actually come back and said, you know, is there also a way of having that feedback loop? Should they be having that feedback loop? So if they've provided the equipment, to then touch base with that person to see how it's going with that equipment, and then be able to do additional modifications if needed.
Absolutely. You know, we normally provide equipment to people who are experiencing discomfort or have an injury. It's absolutely essential in those cases, particularly if you're in a regulated country, to make sure that any control measures you're implementing are effective into the long term. Quite often with equipment, people will have that brief euphoria. I've got my sit-stand desk, I feel great, and that euphoric feeling will, you know, overshadow any discomfort they may have. But as they fall back into old patterns and old habits, which inevitably a lot of people will do, they'll stop using that sit-stand desk. You know, to Guy's comment, we need to make sure that discomfort is being managed into the long term.
Okay, thank you. And next question is, so this is a company who have, over lockdown in particular, had some new starters who've actually never been in an office environment. So they're completely new to the company, have not been in the office environment, are really keen to come into the office environment, but they've also got other employees that want to stay at home, want to be completely home based. So how would they go about balancing the needs of those two quite disparate sets of people?
It's a difficult one. I mean, that's the problem. It's so specific. My first comment, it's about the culture of the business, and so the nature of the company will dictate the route to follow. And we're seeing in the press people saying, right, everybody's coming back to work, or people saying we're getting rid of all our buildings. And there is no, you know, it's a classic ergonomist answer to everything, although I'm not an ergonomist, I work with lots. The answer is always, it depends. And that's no help to anybody, of course, but it is the starting point of the conversation. I think really it's a case of, it's probably worth getting everybody in to at least meet each other if they're all comfortable with that, and then actually get them in to have a conversation about what they do want to do, what they don't want to do. And you might want to pre-do prior to that, do an initial survey. But probably I would recommend, unless they're very confident in-house, be worth getting a third-party moderator for the meeting or to help with the creation of the survey, because it's so easy and I think we're all guilty of it. We've all still, you know, COVID went on a blooming long time, but not quite long enough for us to have completely forgotten what it was like before. And my great fear for this whole thing is employers slowly but surely will just slip back into what they used to do because that's our comfort zone. And then this COVID in many ways has been an amazing opportunity, and we need to grasp that now. So I've probably gone off a bit from the question, but in principle, I'd say the first thing to do is get an idea of where the common ground is to start with and what the company needs are, because you need to actually fulfill the requirements of all your staff as well as you possibly can. But equally, you know, it's got to be what's right for the company is the final decision on it.
It's also worth looking at some of the out-of-the-box reasons why people may not be comfortable to come into the office. We have a project with a US bank right now, and they found a lot of workers do not want to come back into the office because they don't want to leave their new dogs on their own. You've got separation anxiety with their pets, and it's a thing. You know, people are desperately concerned about it. So by way of overcoming that, they simply pay for doggy daycare for their workers that have new pets that want to come into the office. So it's costing them money, but it's dealing with an issue that is a real issue that is preventing people from coming into the office. So it's worth trying to understand what is the real reasons that people are hesitant to come back into the office, because when you get the real reasons, you can start to do something about it.
I think also that's a classic example of where culture is central to it, because I know companies where the solution is to tell people to bring their dogs with them. And there are businesses where that works really well. And I know, John, you've got your dog right behind you in the background. And there are businesses where that would be a monumental disaster. And in either case, you have to weigh up all the pros and cons. But I do think it's actually about what's best for the business overall in the long term. But how does that fit the DNA of the business?
Okay, thank you. Stephen, have you anything else to add to that?
I just lost audio for about 2 minutes, so I do apologise. So no, sorry, I don't.
Thank you. I think those are all our questions that we've got today. So I think I'll leave it there. Can I just thank you all for joining us, especially to Stephen, Guy and John for sharing their knowledge with us. Thanks to everybody that's attended the webinar. I'll put the recording onto the YouTube channel later today or first thing in the morning, so you'll be able to catch up or recap on anything in your own time. You'll also be sent a poll, and at the end of that poll, do indicate whether you'd like to request those publications from Cardenas, and we'll make sure that your details are sent over to Cardenas so you can get those. So thank you ever so much for joining us. We'll end the webinar now, and I look forward to seeing you again at another IIRSM webinar very shortly. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.